All right, we'll go ahead and start. So today's panel is the augmented newsroom and how advanced technologies fit in with the newsroom of the future. The topic is building the newsroom of the future. First of all, thanks to the panelists here today, my guests. Let me introduce them. Mr. Ibrahim Nassar, Manager of Contribution and Distribution for Aljazeera Media Network. Oscar Teran, Head of Technology and Solutions for Eurovision. Bogdan Fursina, Founder of Dejero. And Daniel Cooper, Head of Media for Inmarsat. All right, so at some point in the conversation, and we may go a little shorter than we planned today because we're tight on time, I will open the floor up for questions. But for now, we want to just keep it to a discussion between the panelists and some questions that I'll throw their way. The first thing I want to ask, what are the latest challenges and trends in news gathering? Ibrahim, let me start with you. Are you all hearing Ibrahim okay?
Yeah, sorry. Yep. I was remembering the old days when we are covering news from the field, from the wars in Iraq and other areas. We have been using a very heavy equipment and news gathering called SNGs, waiting tons and huge number of flight cases. Nowadays, we can stream over internet very easy. So I think the changes in the systems and the services used for news gathering has superpowered the newsroom with the new developments, plus the connectivity, which makes the news gathering is more rapid, fast, and can ensure exclusivity for the news room and broadcasters.
Oscar, what do you think?
Well, I think that the problem starts from the pressure over the journalist community on delivering with shorter time, so with speed, also efficiency in terms of cost and productivity. What we see that is going on in the news gathering field, it's just the new solutions that are responding to this global phenomena. So before it was a matter of offering SLA and high quality. Today the editorial criteria and the speed for delivering content is on top of any quality. Still SLAs and qualities are relevant, but the flexibility and the cost, I think that it goes first. So we have moved from a scenario of heavy infrastructure, as you rightly said, mostly satellite-based, to more mobility, more on-the-fly agility to deliver content by using any means of transmission. And that can be a satellite, it can be IP, mobile connectivity, it can be private networks, or it can be public networks. And try to integrate all that with a coherent tool so we can improve the productivity in the newsrooms.
Bogdan?
I think the problem is twofold. It's about generating as much content as the fellow panelists mentioned earlier. It is nowadays about speed of content and quantity of content rather than quality, in my opinion. And I'm talking journalistic value quality. It's more like, this is the content, throw it on air, adjust it later if we need to. And that's sort of the attitude these days. So I think it's just more, but the problem is the speed of Twitter, the speed of social media that's driven that requirement, I think, from a business perspective. So it's all about delivering it on multi-platform, get as much content as you can, diverse content, to put it on all these different platforms. Now, the only way you can move this content is you need the fundamental thing called connectivity. So as we mentioned, it depends whatever method there is. It's this concept of what I define as ubiquitous connectivity. So any connected method should operate the same way, the same workflow. And ultimately, all the stuff ends up back in a newsroom. So now we used to have all these people managing all this ingest. They're all coming in. Well, once you talk about user-generated content, it can be thousands of feeds coming in. So that's something you can't handle with humans. It has to be done with machine learning and AI and things along those lines. So I think the newsroom of the future is going to be a hybrid approach to start with, and then eventually we'll go into a fully cloud, but I think we'll still end up with some sort of physical infrastructure that we need to in order to control some of it. But that's where I believe we're going to end up in the future. I think all connectivity will become seamless between satellite, cellular, and terrestrial. It will become one. and it will be sort of whatever is available, that's what will be used. And it's about making it really simple, because our journalists are not technology people. They're journalists. Their job is to get as much content as quickly as possible on air, so make it really, really simple. I always believed in that, and it's all about taking the Apple approach to things. The moment you add complications to things, it will drive a lot of questions, it will drive less adoption, and you just simply won't be able to get it off the ground.
Daniel, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, these are all absolutely spot-on points. I suppose I would sort of end this by really saying, if we get our mission right, you just don't know what network you're using. It just performs for you in the way that you switch on your cellular phone when you leave an aircraft. You expect it to work now. And as we talked over lunch, the journalists' day-to-day activities are getting bigger, more complicated, there's more pressure. So for us, our mission is to make sure it simply works for you in a reliable way, and you don't know how it's functioning in the back.
So Bogdan and Daniel, you also just referred to this. You're talking about how journalists can utilize all this. Myself, as a journalist, as a senior correspondent for Aljazeera English, I'm very curious to know how you think these changes will affect the newsroom of the future, especially in the next 5 years, let's say.
I think you will have more tools in your toolbox. I think they will become easier to use. I think your main tool, sadly, is going to be your iPhone or your mobile phone. That's going to be your first line of response. So with this, I've got a camera. These cameras are getting better every year. Sure, I don't have the same lens, I don't have the same capacity, but it's small, it's quick, you get very agile. You're able to deliver this to Facebook, you're able to deliver this to a newsroom, you're able to get content very, very quickly. So that will give you a tool to be able to actually get that content very quickly back. In addition to that, it will give you options. It will give you options whether you want it as an edited file or if you want it as a live file. And that will be the first response. Then the next part comes in. As the story will develop, you're going to set up camp. Once you set up camp, now you've got other options. You've got things like satellites, you've got things like bonded cellular that all are going to come with and give you more options to be able to have a higher quality, more reliability of the stream. But you're going to be first now breaking news, and then you're going to build out a story out of it if it's worth it. If it's not, you're just going to move on to the next step and cover more content. The unfortunate side will be how AI will take your first snippet and then cut it down to deliver it to social media. While you're doing a 2-3 minute thing potentially on air, it'll be a 30-second thing that will end up being on Twitter. It'll be another 30-second thing that ends up on Facebook. And that will all automate in the background rather than you having to do all the editing. I think, or not fully, but at least they'll show you so it simplifies your amount of effort. They'll do 80% of it. I think that's what's going to happen on that.
Yeah, I'd echo those points. I mean, I think the day of the 10 o'clock news, the 9 o'clock news, that's sadly for the journalist, I'm afraid, is probably something in the past. So for us, it's really about allowing these services to happen seamlessly whilst on location. But also back in the newsroom, it's about being able to provide the services in a sort of cost and manageable way so you have the confidence to deploy to a story. I mean, there's nothing worse than spending a lot of time, money and effort as a journalist being deployed and then not able to file your story. So for us to get to a sort of a global understanding of what quality content and connectivity looks like, I think makes the job of the newsroom on a day-to-day basis a lot more effective and a lot more cost-controlled.
Sorry, to add a really quick point. It's really sad that living in North America, dealing with a lot of the issues there's school shootings, unfortunately, every 2 days. And nowadays, so we used to have a rule that if there's any kind of human death, we would want to send out somebody to the event to help out with, provide additional capacity, provide additional units, and so on. The sad part is, the newsrooms have this really cut and dry kind of conversation. Is it less than 20 people injured or less than 10 people dead? We don't even go and cover it. Like, it's really, that's how bad it's got. It's just so common, this kind of stuff, that you have explosions all over the world. You've got all kinds of issues that happen, school shootings, horrible massacres that happen in the United States, in the Middle East, in Europe, and people don't even care about covering it because it's too small of a human casualty. So the story is not big enough to spend the money to fly somebody out there to cover it. I mean, that's how sad it is. The Michigan story that just happened a couple of days ago with the school shooting, it got covered in the morning and that was it. Oh, suspect got apprehended, that's it.
Ibrahim, what do you say to that? I mean, our jobs have changed so fundamentally, and the way that news is delivered has changed so fundamentally in the last even 5 years because of the role of social media, because of live streaming apps. How do you think this will affect the newsroom of the future? I mean, how will it change things?
Absolutely, but just I want to comment on the point mentioned by the guys. regarding the change, what can impact the newsroom and the future of a newsroom. Indeed, there is a lot of tools. We hear it in this two-day summit about artificial intelligence and augmented reality and virtual reality. All these stuff are very important tools in the hands of newsroom, although I see some scary or panicking from their side to accept it. But they are very important, and I can mention the example of this is usually with the AIs, we can have very useful engines, like to understand the consumer behavior, to understand what the viewers they are aiming to expect from us to produce. So the content production, even in the field, shouldn't be just randomly and based on what the newsroom believe they should convey to the public. It should be more targeted. It should be more centric approach with the consumer behavior. So we will end up have some personalization content. We can have also these AI's engines helping understanding the trend of news nowadays. What is the most important story needed by the guys? So we can focus our hybrid platform infrastructure to cope with the needs, even from content creation and making this service available to our journalists in the field. There's a lot of benefits of AI technologies and machine learning. We are exploring a lot of solutions in machine learning, like helping translation and transcription, the live events we are doing on air, which will help the audiences and special care audiences like deaf people to understand the news. So they are very touching our lives. And I think the future for these technologies is promising if we know how to use it and adapt it to the newsroom.
In your opinion, what are the first steps that would be taken in a current newsroom to try to start applying AI? I mean, what I mean by that is, are we talking about something as simple as editing, of having fewer editors because there's software that can help with that? Or are we talking about just data mining and finding stories and research? What are the concrete steps that need to be taken?
I think the first step in this, we should focus on data scientists, data analysis. Even in normal our lives, we have to make our decisions based on data. So I think most of the news people and broadcasters, they need to focus on this science. So data mining, data analysis will help them understand the nature of these tools. And then, of course, apply them. Because see, now even we can use it to produce the reports more quickly than even before. No need to spend a lot of time in screening and reviewing a lot of video files to produce a 3-minute video clip. We can use artificial intelligence here. With some video indexing, we can identify objects, whatever criteria like videos, names, and then we can filter our content and use it.
Oscar, I saw you nodding. Did you want to add to that?
Yep. Thank you. I think that any technology needs to be at the service of who are the key users and the ones that they are delivering the product. In this case, in the newsroom, we are talking about journalists and journalism. So I think that most probably in the coming years, we will have perhaps an increasing wave of more detailed research-oriented investigative journalism that will have perhaps different needs, even if assisted by machine learning, than what it is the fast commodity news, digital base kind of engaging with the audience. So in this respect, I think that perhaps in one field you will see technology and machine learning more focused in efficiency. It could be in the field, as you mentioned, of adding metadata live while you are ingesting the content. Today you have libraries assisting in Microsoft AWS cloud, and there's direct link with the cloud to recognize VIPs, to make a speech to text, and it's very agile to build these solutions. This is in one field, and there's a second field that it would be more research, less time critical. It's still time critical, but with more time in which the journalist needs to make a research, contrast the sources, especially in this time that there's let's say over increasing presence of information that maybe you trust or maybe you don't trust. So in there, I think that data mining tools tools that helps together with data scientists and perhaps a DevOps team attached to the newsroom will give the opportunity to go and contrast and basically create the stories that they are more solid overall.
You mentioned a key thing that I wanted to try to address during this panel, which is metadata. I'd like to try to put to you all the question of, first is trying to break down to the audience, exactly how important it is to capture and use metadata and what its role will be in the shaping of the newsroom of the future. Ibrahim, do you want to start? Or Daniel, would you like to go?
From an Inmarsat perspective, we're very much the pipe. But it strikes me at the moment we're talking an awful lot about acquisition from the field. And I think part of this metadata, part of this AI functionality is to allow the journalists in the field to get that slightly more holistic view as to what's happening in the rest of the newsroom so that they can then optimize their acquisition into the newsroom. And that, of course, is where you could really sort of shrink down the process and really be very precise and tight with your metadata that will allow you later on in life to use that to far more effect. And of course, with AI looking at it in a sort of more microscopic way, I think that will speed up the workflow tremendously.
I find an interesting thing with metadata because related to pretty much the entire conversation is, the question is, what is the newsroom of the future, right? But I would also ask the question, what is news in the future? Which is actually a more fundamental question, which should drive the rest of the requirement, right? Because I believe if my neighbor breaks their legs, that's actually news to me. It is not news to you, but it's news to me, and that's important to me because I want to know what's going on. While I may be interested in global affairs as well, that is also news to me because I'm interested in that. Other people may be interested in technology and might want to be ignorant in other places.
Yeah, we are living at a time now where everybody has their own news feed.
Correct.
And they can get it out to as wide an audience as they want.
That is called the personalization. And what you need is
Correct.
you should work for me to deliver.
Correct.
Not what you need to convey the messages. That's
Right.
usually in the legacy journalism.
And that's where I was going.
And the power of the digital.
And that's the beauty of metadata. That was sort of my point of the whole thing. So metadata can allow you to actually relate that to the requirements of the audience, which is what we're all trying to do. The challenge is understanding your audience at the ultra microscopic level as an individual that's watching your news feed. That is very difficult to do today. It's very difficult for me to characterize who you are. If you're a Google user, Google knows a ton of stuff about you. It is incredible what they actually know about you. Based on that, they can then personalize a lot of content around it. So it can be used for negativity and it can be used for positivity. So with the newsroom and the newsroom of the future, we have an editor that tries to control the bias and so on. I have a fundamental issue with currently in the public, we don't have processes and systems that control that and regulate that. It allows every corporation to do as they please, and they grab some of the content as it is. I mean, that's what the whole thing in EU is happening with Google and personalized data. But regardless of all that, and I don't want to open up that can of worms, but metadata gives you characteristics of a particular piece of content, a particular person, a consumer, and it allows you to match those to address the better of the story, to be able to pull the B-roll, to be able to do all that. So from a practical perspective, it's key to enable everything. And metadata, I would argue, is a lot of things. It's not just text. It's a lot of visual representation in text and audio and everything else that goes with location, etc. But I think that's a very important piece that we got to take into the future of the newsroom to be able to actually deliver the content. Because again, it's not just the linear content that we're doing. Sorry.
Which I think also the understanding the consumer behavior or how our audiences perceive news or what they need also help us in the space of monetization. So we can monetize our video content in much better informed way if we know exactly what they need, and then we can also personalize the advertisements that we are targeting based on the geographical locations of them, based on the peak times of the day, based on their habits, their culture, their language. So this stuff is the booming and will superpower the newsroom capability to make influence, not only just to convey the news.
So if we're talking about also data collection and we're talking about metadata, it also leads us to talk about security concerns. I mean, what are the security concerns now? What are the security concerns going to be in 2, 3, 4 years from now?
So it was an interesting thing, and I'm sorry, it was I have a customer who's a global news agency that has requested specifically to disable geolocation because they go into a lot of areas where if the journalists would be found out that they're actually in that location, they could be captured, they could, all kinds of things could happen to them. So they just don't want to run the risk in case they get hacked to actually have access to that. So that is an example of, we call it dark mode, that was requested specifically for that from a security perspective. And when you're talking about security, that addresses physical security, I think, as well as data security, because you need to protect that. And I mean, our systems are, everything is hackable. That's the reality of life. Given enough time and money, it's hackable. The only thing, security has become a business. And if you have data that is relevant to somebody, that is valuable, they will hack it because it's got value to them. I mean, there's unfortunately people that sit there 24/7, like not 24/7, sorry, 8 hours a day, and their entire job is to hack somebody. And they've got, it's phenomenal once you actually hear these organizations. They've got people that sort of, instead of lead generation, like calling up and asking for customers and find out who it is, they find out vulnerabilities in networks. They implant the virus, and then they take that network and they pass it on to the guys who will actually grab the data. That time span can take as long as 3 weeks.
And by the way, they are using also the same artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. Well, that's
So
the crazy part.
It's a weapon of two faces. It depends how you use it. So also machine learning, they are using it for hacking and making the algorithm how to penetrate those vulnerabilities.
So security is critical to all this stuff in the future.
Imagine the huge number of content we are receiving. And with the digitization, we will receive much more. And this creates disruption and noise. And this will become the job of a newsroom more to judge on the legitimate content from the manipulated content or the fake content. So I don't know how technology can help in this, a much of verification, unless we apply some security and cyber security and encryptions to identify those legitimate users, especially in the cloud. The challenge becomes more obvious than if you have it on premises or the old era of contributions feed.
Oh, sorry, I completely disagree. I would argue the cloud is way more secure than it is on-prem. The amount of money they spend on security is nowhere near the same.
People, I hear that. They are much more secure.
Yes.
Yes. But we need to have the proof. We need to use it first. With the level
Oscar,
of,
you might want to...
Yeah, Oscar?
I think that it depends. You know, I don't think that there's something secure or not secure. It depends how you use it. Of course, the infrastructure and the foundations of the public cloud, they're solid enough to offer services to different industries. But at the end, you're running applications with a certain framework. And I think that this goes in the direction of again, security. I think that security in the media industries has two sides. The first one is the more that we converge into IT and IT tools, IT networks, the more than security becomes really a paramount issue. And as Bogdan said, this is a kind of endless war between, discovering a vulnerability, patching, and keep on going. Of course, I think that our main concern is to avoid that this disrupts our operations or has an impact on the brand of Aljazeera or any other broadcaster. At the same time, I think that there's a second layer that is checking that your content source is right. You are not taking something that has been manipulated, and so on. For Eurovision as a media organization, we take it very seriously. We introduce roles of chief security officer, and we are trying to secure at least our private networks and appearing with the public network as much as we can, because we see, as we said at the very beginning, we see more and more that you don't care anymore about where your contribution device is placed. You just want to use any connectivity, and any connectivity implies a risk. So you need to know very well what you're doing.
Daniel, did you want to add to that?
So we can certainly de-risk the connectivity anywhere scenario with private IP addresses, managed networks, etc. But I think also if you sort of think about in a few years' time where might this be? When you think of the Uber model, wouldn't it be great if you could pull on broadcasters, journalists, devices anywhere in the world? And Uber's been a fantastic success in that respect. We don't really think too much now about the security of Uber. I mean, that was something that was there in the early days, and I think it becomes a process in your mind as to how much risk if you've got the connectivity, if you've got that sort of trusted connection, can you start to spend a little bit more time analysing what that content really looks like and therefore making an informed and judgment type of decision?
Let me ask this. There's so much content that's coming in all the time now, such a huge volume of content. How are we able to manage that? How is that going to be able to be curated going forward?
Well, I think Bogdan's going to say it is all down to the curation, aren't you? Mm-hmm. It's all down to the curation, and AI is going to play a role in that. But I think also it's a more general question. It's about workflow, isn't it? If you have a standardized workflow, rather than thinking, is this coming in off satellite, off cellular, off a videotape, in the really old days, all those processes, they take extra time. It's extra work for the journalist, it's extra work for the commissioning editor. So as soon as you can condense those processes, you can cover that ground a lot quicker. AI certainly has a role to play there, but I'd also say that the human interest in the story is still going to be very, very powerful. So yeah, I'm all for AI, but I still think the role of the journalist there in the field and the commissioning editor, that's not going to be usurped by any stretch of the imagination.
So I'll put a different perspective on it. I had, so we get involved a lot with security organizations now, and we work with them on a lot of things. Microsoft has a product called Microsoft Aware. What Microsoft Aware does, it basically takes information about a particular event and a time of day, and any related piece of information it can find and summarize it for you. So they're already working on technologies today that, so let's say there was a gas leak in a city. You can tell it's at 2:30 in the afternoon. The system will actually go and gather every single piece of content at 2:30 from social media, it gets really spooky and scary, from social media, from all the live cameras, CCTV cameras that are available, and actually will summarize all the different camera angles for that location. It will summarize everything that's happened prior to that event, and it all comes on one single pane of glass. And all that information then is then digitized to one single person that watches this and tries to summarize what it is. I think we have a slightly different problem because this one doesn't need to be curated. It needs to come raw, right? With news, it's a little different because you want the video that is most relevant. And that simple requirement of more relevancy or better story, more dramatic impact, which is what news is about these days, it requires somehow a way of curating that huge amount of content that can come in from UGC, from journalists, because there's no news organization in the world that can have the journalists everywhere in the world at the same time when the stuff is happening. So you have to have partnerships. You have to deploy from UGC some sort of technology or in a partnership, like another partnership media organization to come and bring it in. It's not about competition, it's about co-opetition, like cooperation and competition at the same time these days. I think the days of just competing in the news world, they're starting to go away. We need to figure out how to cooperate. We've done this forever in the technology side. We just need to start doing it on the journalistic side. Anyways, so maybe
Oscar?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I could not agree more with Bogdan. I think that there's a second golden era for collaborative frameworks across organizations. Of course, with different editorial lines, with different points of view, but most probably agencies re-empowered by technology, also unions like the EBU or any association of broadcasters can have more to gain if they work together, at least in that area of processing of metadata and managing jointly the pipelines of content back into the newsrooms. I think that is much better, much more efficient. Still, there's the role of the human being assisted by machine learning in terms of adding metadata, tagging, contrasting the information, adding a dop sheet, and so on. I think that there's a space for collaboration in this new context. It is really required.
Ibrahim, did you want to add to
I
that?
agree with the guys, absolutely. We need to work hand by hand with the newsroom, with the journalist. Technology is there. We need to provide them the most fast, rapid, and secure, reliable. From our side, it should be cost effective. And then all these tools, as I mentioned, it's in the hands of journalists. They can use it if they being trained how to use it. And also we need some skill set that can adopt the new era of these artificial intelligence and machine learning from both sides, technology and journalists. And there should be a new job roles in this area to support the future of newsrooms and future of broadcasters.
Okay. So we're running low on time. We have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and open things up for the audience to ask questions. Does anybody have a question? Let's just get you a microphone if that's okay, so we'll all be able to hear you. Oh no, just because we're also, yeah, we're web streaming as well. Yeah, there you go.
So first, I would like to thank the panelists for the discussion. It's a great thing, and I've been thinking all the time about what you're talking. So the question is, the time for the traditional newsroom is over or is coming to be over, and what can the newsroom learn from the social media and the Ubers and the Airbnb and all of these models? Because look at it, there is about 8 billion human beings on this world. Everyone is a story. There are objects, there are animals, there is a story, and each one story is important or relevant to one person at least. So the model of centralizing the news gathering, curating, distributing, no matter how big the army of journalists and cameramen and the organization are, still is limited, is finite, and there is a ceiling that you reach, where the stories are infinite, the resources for supporting the biggest news organization in the world is still finite. So, and right now we look at Facebook and Twitter and all of these are just another outlet to extend our reach and distribution capabilities. Whereas actually, if you look at it, a lot of people rely on Twitter and Facebook as their primary source of news, whether it's fake or bias or whatever, but it is their primary source of news. So we are in a competition where I think it's the time for us to look into a different model. That centralized model, no matter how we empower with AI or better networking, communication, all of these, still is limited, still is finite, still not going to go away. The professional journalists are competing with whoever, the 17, 16 years old, who are publishing stories that are gaining a lot of traction and attraction. And again, it may not be polished, it may not be like well curated or all this stuff, but still, it got its audience and it's got its relevance.
So, sir, let's just go ahead and let the panelists start trying to address all that, if
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
okay.
I mean, you're absolutely right. The guy in his bedroom can publish a news story very, very quickly indeed. But I think there's a huge, huge difference between a single source story versus a polished and professional story by two sources of journalism, perhaps with an editorial overview. Now, that doesn't mean to say that has to be on Aljazeera at primetime TV. To your point, it could absolutely be on a streaming platform. And to Bogdan's point, once you've got the profile of the customer or the viewer understood, then it becomes a far more meaningful form of engagement. So I see the model changing slightly. I don't see the end of the newsroom, far from it. I think the newsrooms are going to become a far, far busier place with an awful lot of demands going on. And just an idea in your mind, how do you vision mix Facebook Live?
So I think you're touching on two very interesting points. One is, what is the power of a story? It's a concept that I've been talking around with people for a while, which is how significant is the story and how wide-reaching is it? And based on that, you actually make some decisions. Right now, you guys look for catastrophic, very big, dramatic stories. But then what I see is 10 journalists from the same city going into the same location to cover the same mayoral speech, which is then just broadcast by 10 different cameramen that goes to 10 different newsrooms that gets published with almost the same camera angle in 10 different publishing sites. And that is a fact.
Good for the bandwidth sellers.
Oh, we're very happy with that. But
Yeah, we actively encourage that, of course. But we're missing the trick about the mobility and the further afield, aren't we? But,
fair enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at the efficiency of utilization of assets at that point in time, which are your journalists, it's horrible. It absolutely is horrible. So how can, and I mean, there's lots of times where you join forces and you try to cover an election campaign or whatever, but what happens then, so the competition is there, which is fine, but the competition is there for every bloody story. And that's where the issue comes in now. Like, how do you optimize that? And I think that's a business model that has to change. There has to be some sort of cooperation between organizations to be able to be more efficient in this. I mean, really, if the mayor speaks and you have one journalist there and they ask the same questions that all the newsroom want, what really is the difference? Because it's the same person speaking, it's not 10 of them. So that's where I see. So that's one part of it, and again, the other part of it is like, again, the power of the story that will dictate where that is. And I think there's a lot of AI applications. There's a lot of technology that can be put into that can predict, based on the users and the audience you're trying to reach, how important the story will be to them and how far-reaching will it be. Based on that, you can then make the decision on what assets, where do I deploy them, and how well do I deploy them to be effective. Anyway, that's my...
Can I ask a question back to the
I
audience?
think,
on that
if you allow
same
me,
theory?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, go
I
ahead,
think
Ibrahim.
with this this is very good question. It's touching the nerve because, you know, at the end, what's happening, there's always a challenge or a fight or say, competition between the legacy school and the new school of journalism. And I'm afraid by time, if those guys in the legacy domain still use a lot of news judgment to filter and do their own manual artificial intelligence, if you want to name it, to filter the news or to judge if it's legitimate, non-legitimate. The news is already, they lost the opportunity. They are not anymore breaking news channels. There's another group of people, young, and they make the message already to the public, and they will make the influence, and there will be a news stream, and they will be like secluded from the whole picture. So it's always compromise between the fast and the ethics and judgment they want to do. So I think this debate will continue until transformation happening some sort of.
Daniel, you wanted to make another point?
Yeah, thanks. I was going to sort of ask for a show of hands and just try and understand who in the audience felt some kind of Uber-style news gathering service would be attractive to their operations. If it's cheaper. Well, yeah, that's the big assumption.
How much more content are you planning to produce so you can argue that it's cheaper? Are you talking cheaper per story?
Well, that's the leverage,
But that's
isn't
the
it?
problem.
Yeah.
That's exactly the issue, right?
I think they're using it
Yeah.
nowadays. I mean, there is Uber service for media content creation. It exists.
That has extended through all
Let's-
the model.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, but
I'm against the central. Well, I'm
Let's-
speaking my own opinion, by the way. so
sure.
Against the centralization, because no matter what you do, it's finite.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's
still-
go ahead and because
Sorry, Oscar.
I know there's some more. Oh, did you have a point you want to make now, Oscar?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that, gentlemen, we're here, you know, in this side of the room, you know, as experts. I feel a responsibility with regards to it. I'm not a journalist, but so I cannot have an educated opinion about it. What I see is that we are mixing up three concepts, that it is basically content gathering with user-generated content and journalism.
Yep.
And for me, a journalist is not the guy that goes with the camera and then he puts himself in front of the camera and says whatever. I think that there's another dimension and ethics around it, preparation around it, certain skills around it, also being educated and research, and most probably there's, as I said, an opportunity in front of us to take journalism one step forward, but I'm just an engineer with certain set of skills, so I cannot have really an educated opinion. What I see is that in this conversation, we are mixing up three different concepts, and we are thinking that the Uber driver is Fernando Alonso. It doesn't work really like this.
It gets you there really fast.
Sir, did you have a question? Does anybody else have a question? Can you just hand him back the mic?
So I just have a question about the future of the newsroom. So do you see, like, in that future, do we have any role of blockchain or decentralized network? Because we talk about the fake news and all that kind of stuff, and I believe, like, that is the only.
So so I hate using marketing jargon. So blockchain is a technology that is a proof of transaction in a mass quantity. The funny thing about it is blockchain can be wrong, but because the majority says it's right, if that makes any sense.
So proof of work, probably that's the thing you're talking about.
Well, no,
but
proof of
now
work
they
is a
change it to proof
component
of
of
stake.
blockchain.
So now there's technology, Ethereum kind of technology. Like they're using proof of
I guess what I'm
stake.
trying to say is if somebody says that a transaction of $10 happened, and there's 100 people and 90 people say that happened, whether it happened or not is irrelevant. 90 people said it happened, therefore it happened.
No, my question is about the blockchain, not the cryptocurrency.
Well, no, I know, but that's my point. So that's the fundamental, the function of blockchain, right? So if that's the function of blockchain, when we're talking about how to use blockchain in the newsroom, I really have a hard time using it for content. I understand transactional-based content where you're talking about moving it from A to B. That makes some sense.
That's right.
For fake news and things along those lines, it's really difficult to use it, except what you're going to have is you're going to have a majority. But I'm sure you have an opinion. We'll talk about
Well,
it
you
later.
could also end up with the fake news being 100% authenticated
Exactly.
by blockchain. Yeah.
That's my point out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we need to distinguish between what it is really hype and what is bringing value. And of course, there's always cross-pollination across industries, you know, and something that is applied in one field that can be applied in another. Distributed data-based systems and hash-based systems, they have been in the technology panorama, you know, already for many years. I think that most probably media and non-linear based systems, they will become more distributed.
Yeah.
They will make usage of several technologies, but I don't particularly see blockchain as a disruptor because, among other things, you know, when you speak about fake news, we don't speak about somebody that you were expecting a file, and suddenly you receive another file in your newsroom. It's happening in kitchens that they are located in several areas, that they are publishing content, they are creating content, and they are echoing and resonating content to influence. So yes, but we need to distinguish between what it is really the hype and do not automatically relate with big words, as we have been doing today most of the day with AI, you know, big words, and understand that that's the solution for all our problems that we have. At the end, we have technology as a set of palette of tools that we need to apply to the problems that we have. Otherwise, what it could happen is that you end up creating problems yourself, trying to apply a technology because it's there, it's available.
Over-engineering it maybe, yeah.
And at the end, maybe you don't sort out any problem that is meaningful for a community, only meaningful for yourself.
Okay, we got time for one more question. Anybody else? Sure. Can somebody just hand this gentleman the mic? No, just because we're streaming, so they want to be able to, for the audience to hear the question.
Now, speaking about the newsroom and the social media, you know, do you think that, like you said, that the blockchain it's a hype? Do you think that social media is also a hype, that at some point it will? It's like a flood, you know. We got flooded, and the regular journalism are just holding on to that piece of wood in the flood, just waiting for the flood to go away, and then.
Well, last quarter was the first quarter Facebook audience went flat, so it didn't grow, which is an interesting thing. So I don't know what that means for the future. It's just that's a fact. I believe that the change in consumption of content has changed, and it's going to be changed forever. That said, I also believe this concept of TV dying, I've heard about it for about 10 years now, I think. It's every year it dies. Okay, good. So it's almost dead, I guess, but we're all right for now. So yeah, so TV is dead every year, but the good news is we're still here. We're still talking about television and how to create content, because at the end of the day, content is what counts, and that's what television is. It generates content. It generates important content that's relevant. So the interesting thing with Facebook, it's a distribution platform that will always be there, and I don't think that will go away. But I do believe linear TV, where I don't have to interact with the television, people enjoy that. They just want to turn it on and just watch it. Because you're going to decide, and you're going to keep me out of the ignorant box. That's the problem with AI. If you watch YouTube for a while, right, it starts giving you the same bloody videos with a different character and a different thing that's going to keep on being published, right? The cat in the tree, then there's the cat on the street, then there's the cat in the house. I got it. I got to see all the cat videos now. So the interesting thing is I would like to see a bus video for once, you know, but that doesn't come up very easily. Unless it's a bus in a tree, right? Because that's relevant now.
Very brief.
Go ahead.
Just to mention that blockchain is a family of technologies altogether, while social media, it's a set of services that they are present and delivered, you know, there. So we are talking about two different things. You know, of course, there's hypes, you know, trends, and we all like to speak about new things, and we are used to. But blockchain, for sure, it has, besides the crypto coins, and it has a lot of potential for decentralizing processes. In the media, there will be fields in which it will be applied, and it has a lot of potential, but we shouldn't see it as the signed grail of blockchain disrupts everything, changes everything, and so on, because the tools there were before. There was somebody very clever that applied it and put it all together for one purpose.
Sure. I mean,
Daniel, go ahead.
A very quick point. I mean, Bogdan talks about the Facebook platform and the sort of downturn or the flatness of the subscriptions or viewing figures. I think what's really critical here, I mean, I forget the figure, but it's something like 9% of the millennials, i.e. the Facebook generation, are now paying for content. They're paying for a newspaper. Of course, it's not a newspaper, it's an online edition. But people are understanding there's a value in journalism, there's a value in authenticity, there's a value in the content. And that really is the heart of our business, other than telling the story, of course.
What's the percentage of the non-millennials that pay for content?
Well, virtually zero, isn't it?
Well, no. I mean, I used to pay for a newspaper on a regular basis,
Yeah.
right? So that's my question. Like,
Oh, sorry, you mean
from
the
that
non-millennials?
I'm pretty sure it's a lot higher than 9%. That's
Well,
my
it
only point.
changes, doesn't it? You know,
Yes.
as you go through your life, you know, your circumstances change, your appetites, your time changes. I mean, we spend a lot of our time on aeroplanes, so we're probably quite high subscribers of offline publishing, aren't we? Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Daniel Cooper, Bogdan Fursina, Oscar Teran, and Ibrahim Nassar. We really appreciate having you here and getting to hear your insights in this. And thank you all for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Shukran.